Greetings, everyone. I'm going to come at you with this report. Now, I'm not sure if many of you have heard of this whole thing with Deagel and this America's depopulation. I'm going to kind of go over this. I'm going to kind of connect some dots. As you and I, as you probably may have observed, is that once Obama elected this czar, this Ebola czar, Ron Klain, it seems like everything kind of went quiet as far as Ebola. You're not really hearing too much about it. But in between that, you're seeing a lot of things being put in front of us regarding racial issues, the Ferguson scenario, and these types of. I mean, which all of this ties in, obviously, um, but it is strange that the whole Ebola thing has kind of gone quiet, so to speak. For example, you can go to a site called Extinction Protocol, and they would post constantly on Ebola and what's going on with Ebola. Even not the small cases here in the U.S., but the events in Africa. It just seems like there's been a uh, lulling back to sleep as far as keeping Ebola quiet. Um, this article was published on the 23rd of October 2014. Okay, and it says the target date for America's depopulation has been set. I'm going to go ahead and read this article. I'm not, probably in its entirety. I mean, I got some other things I want to go over. Um, but I'm going to go over a few key points here. So that is very interesting. Okay, so the target date for America's depopulation has been set. And again, we have to ask ourselves, is Ebola going to be somehow tied with this? Or is this going to be kind of a mixture of a little bit of everything? Military conflict and these types of things. But the numbers are staggering. I will say that. The numbers are very staggering, especially between the United States and the United Kingdom, and these types of things. So, the internet is filled with revelations of how the global elite want to depopulate humanity by 90%. Landmarks such as the Georgia Guidestones are at the top of the evidence list for proof of this agenda. There is an emerging body of evidence that the Georgia Guidestones are a correct representation of this idea. And obviously, this is the first commandment of the Georgia Guidestones. Many have heard of it, many have read it. Maintain humanity under 500 million and perpetual balance with nature. Wherever you find a bold new initiative related to the plans of the global elite, you will find documentation arising from various think tank organizations in support of these goals. With regard to the coming forced subjugation of the American population to the stack and pack megacities, two important papers, the 3D, which, by the way, there's a lot of hyperlinks you can click on to get more information on that. The 3D Infrastructure for California's Future and the National Academy of Public Administration's Memos to National Leaders, Partnerships as Fiscal Policy. Jump to the front of the line in espousing the megacities concept on August 27, 2014. I exposed the megacities concept and revealing something called the America 2050 Plan. The enslavement of America has taken center stage and is indeed called America 2050. The plan for America 2050 is to herd Americans into 11 megacities. Now, this is this whole America 2050 thing. The plan for this is to herd Americans into 11 megacities consisting of 6 million people, each totaling 66 million people. Okay, then that's very interesting, especially when we get into this whole Deagel thing. Under this plan, there are no provisions for any other population developments. After reporting in the August 27, 2014 article, I thought the target date for the implementation of the megacities plan would be the year 2050, as indicated in the title of the organization, which is behind the planning of this concept. The article can be read here. You can click on the link, yada yada yada. So, this is the blueprint of this America 2050 plan. Obviously, the population of Americans is roughly stands around 316 million, which will change to 66 million megacity dwellers, which equals 250 million missing Americans. Okay. And this is the Agenda 21 settlements. Obviously, the dense populations is where all these mega cities and where the populations would be. They're obviously divided into these groups here. Um, now, this is where it gets interesting. It appears that the timetable for the implementation of the megacities concept into 300 square foot stack and pack apartments is a lot closer than the year 2050. If a front group for the CIA, Deagel, is correct, okay, now, if this whole Deagel thing is correct, we are about a decade away from this hellish nightmare. So just who is Deagel? Well, Deagel is the power influence of the corporation that you never heard of is staggering. This is the modern day Zapata Oil, which was a CIA front corporation run by George H.W. Bush, which in turn facilitated much of the Air America Drugs for Guns program in Latin America in the 1980s. My sources tell me that Deagel is the same exact kind of organization as Zapata Oil. Deagel ran guns through the ambassador Chris Stevens and subsequently delivered them to Al-Qaeda in Libya and in Syria at the time of Stevens' death. Deagel was intimately involved in Benghazi in ways that will be revealed in a later article. Deagel is not just a gun-running, drug-running, child sex trafficking organization. They are also intimately connected with the business as open-source intelligence links. This means that Deagel and their partner affiliates listed below, which I will show you in a minute, serve as marketing companies for the CIA and self-intelligence information to the highest bidder. Strat 4, which if you dig deep in Strat 4, you will realize that Alex Jones has strong connections with them. And Deagel provide the CIA with a minimum of 2 degrees of separation from nefarious operations which could taint the U.S. government and in particular the CIA. These activities will be the topic of future articles. The focus of the remainder of this article is the destruction and depopulation of the United States. Now, Deagel is a group that gets their hands dirty and they play both sides of the fence. You know, they play the good cop while they play the bad cop. They play both sides of the fence here. Please note the publicly available list of Deagel partners listed below. They do business with the Russian Defense Procurement Agency, but they are largely an American contractor with ties into the U.S. Navy, the NSA, and the CIA through Strat 4. If anyone wanted to make the case that I have the bastard banksters from Basel control both sides of the coming World War III for fun and profit, the data trail of Deagel exemplifies this point. From the following information, we get a strong indication of how the U.S. is going to be depopulated. To further examine this possibility, take a look at a partial list of Deagel partners. The following list clearly shows that Deagel is locked in when it comes to the power centers on this planet. Here's a partial list of Deagel partners. The National Security Agency, North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or NATO, or OTAN, Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the OSCE, Russian Defense Procurement Agency, Strat 4, the World Bank, and the United Nations. In the beginning of 2014, Deagel published a projected demographic shift of every nation on the planet. The projections are noteworthy. As one of the most prolific arms dealers and sellers of intelligent information on the planet, Deagel will be in a unique position from which to make projections with regard to coming world events, as well as being able to anticipate dramatic shifts in global power. Not surprisingly, Deagel has made such a projection, and the news is not good for the United States. Below is a list of projected changes for the United States during the time frame covering 2014 through 2025. I'm going to go ahead and go over this here. And this is found on this Deagel site, which we will go to here in just a moment. You see, the year 2013, the population is roughly 360 million, right? The gross domestic product is at $17 trillion. GDP per capita is at 52 million. Budget is 5.8 trillion. I say 52 trillion. Military budget is 726 billion. Okay. The forecast for 2025, what do we see here? The population is only 69 million. Okay. The gross domestic product is severely downgraded to 921 billion, which the GDP per capita is at 13.328 million, and the military budget is only at 8 billion. Okay. Now, just given that alone, the military would not even be able to hold all the expenses that they do now at this kind of budget. So something tells me that there's going to be some huge events that could possibly take place if this pans out to be correct. Okay. There's a lot of other things we could tie in with this, but please note how the changes in the U.S. population covering an 11-year period mirror what I wrote in the America 2050 article. The projected and dramatic downward shift in America's populations are nearly identical when one compares the America 2050 documents and the Deagel projections. There's another striking projection which should alarm every American. In 2013, the U.S. military budget was $726 billion. However, the projected 2025 projected budget is only $8 billion. This clearly points to the fact that the CIA, through Deagel, is projecting that the United States is going to be militarily conquered within the next 10 years. The mere $8 billion projected 2025 military budget speaks to a domestic martial law type of occupation force. With this kind of budget, the U.S. would not even be able to engage in regional conflicts. Okay, so here is the official Deagel website. Now, I'm going to show you something here. When you just type in Deagel, and I'll provide the links in the description box. When you just type in Deagel, you see that this is just seems like this is just a military guide, equipment, civil aviation, and these types of, there's nothing, there's nothing really, you can find some interesting facts and these types of things about different aircraft, but again, you go down here, and I searched this site through and through. I cannot find any indication that this is a hoax site. I really can't. And that, again, is a very staggering aspect, okay? But when you go to other info and click countries, here you go. Now, there are 209 countries listed below. I'm not going to go through all of them. I'm just going to go over the big ones, okay? And you click here, the View Year 2025 Forecast. And obviously you see countries seeing a rise in population. You see Russia with basically a roughly 10 million drop in population. Germany with a 3 million drop. Japan with a 3 million drop. Italy has a pretty good surmountable drop of almost 20 million people. Canada is almost a 10 million drop. And look at the United States. Okay, the population right now is at 316,440,000, but the population forecasted in 2025 is at 69,086,600. Okay, I'm just going off by what this says. I'm not gonna sit here and scream out, "Oh, the world's coming to an end," yada yada yada. But this is what this says. I can't change that. And then look at here at the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom, which consists of Scotland, Ireland, England, has a very significant drop of almost 30 million. Okay, with their forecasted population at 32 million, as to what it is now at 63 million. Okay, there's another one. Here is Spain with almost a 20 million drop in population. Nigeria, which is very interesting considering the fact that Africa, especially the western side of Africa, is suffering from the Ebola plague. They have a significant drop of almost of about 16 million. Okay. Or of 14 million. So now I'm going to go over this little. I'm not going to read all of this, but this is very interesting um, as to what the notes say regarding this. It says, there have been many questions about the country's forecast, especially the one focusing on the United States of America. They won't be answered one by one, but below you can find some explanation, thoughts, and reflections. We are going to keep this as short as possible. The majority of the economic and demographic data used in the making of the forecast is widely available by institutions such as the CIA, IMF, United Nations, and the United States government, etc. You can see the most relevant data at every single country's page. There's a tiny part of data coming from a variety of shadow sources, such as internet gurus, unsigned reports, and others, but all these sources are from the internet and are of public domain for at least a minority. For example, several years ago, Deagel, the Chinese ratings agency, published a report analyzing the physical economy of the states, comparing it with those of China, Germany, and Japan. The conclusion was that the U.S. GDP was something between 5 to 10 trillion instead of 15 trillion as officially reported by the USG. We assume that the official data, especially economic, released by governments, is fake, cooked, or distorted in some degree. Historically, it is well known that the former Soviet Union was making up fake statistics years before it collapsed. Western as well as other countries are making up their numbers today to conceal their real state of affairs. We are sure that many people out there can find government statistics in their own countries that by their own personal experience are hard to believe or are so optimistic that may belong to a different country. Now, I'm going to read this paragraph here. And it says, despite the numeric data quantity, there is a quality model which has not a direct translation into numeric data. The 2014 strain of Ebola has a death rate of 50 to 60%, but try to imagine what would happen if there is a pandemic of Ebola, which we're going to get into this here next, with hundreds of thousands or millions infected with the virus. So far, the few cases of Ebola-infected people have enjoyed intensive health care with antiviral and breathing assistance, but above all, with abundant human support by physicians and nurses. In a pandemic scenario, that kind of health care won't be available for the overwhelming number of infected, leading to a dramatic increase of the death rate due to the lack of proper health care. The quality factor is that the death rate could increase to 80 to 90% in a pandemic scenario from the stated 50 to 60% rate. The figure itself is not important. What is relevant is the fact that the scenario can evolve beyond the initial conditions from a 50% death toll to more than 90%. By the way, no pandemic or nuclear war is included in the forecast. The key element to understand the process that the USA will enter in the upcoming decade is migration. In the past, especially in the 20th century, the key factor that allowed the USA to rise to its colossus status was immigration, with the benefits of a demographic expansion supporting the credit expansion and the brain drain from the rest of the world benefiting the states. The collapse of the Western financial system will wipe out the standard of living of its population while ending Ponzi schemes such as the stock exchange and the pension funds. The population will be hit so badly by a full array of bubbles and Ponzi schemes that the migration engine will start to work in reverse, accelerating itself due to ripple effects, thus leading to the demise of the states. This unseen situation for the states will develop itself in a cascade pattern with unprecedented and devastating effects for the economy. So here we have the economy to take into account. We have the Ebola thing to take into account. Okay. Now, let's go ahead and read this. Over the past 2,000 years, we have witnessed a Western civilization built around the Mediterranean Sea shifting to Northern Europe, and then by the mid-20th century, shifting to an Atlantic axis to finally get centered into the States in the past 30 years. The next move will see the civilization being centered in Asia, with Russia and China on top. Historically, a change in the economic paradigm has resulted in a death toll that is rarely highlighted by mainstream historians. When the transition from rural areas to large cities happened in Europe, many people unable to accept the new paradigm killed themselves. They killed themselves by psychological factor. This is not mainstream, but it is true. A new crisis joins old, well-known patterns with new ones. Basically, there ain't no new thing under the sun. Sorry to disappoint many of you with our forecast. It is getting worse and worse every year. Since the beginning of the pre-crisis in 2007, it is already said that this website is non-profit, built on spare time, and we provide our information and services as is without further explanation and or guarantee. We are not linked to any government in any way, shape, or form. We are not a death or satanic cult or arms dealer, as some BS is floating around the internet on this topic. Take into account that the forecast is nothing more than a model, whether flawed or correct. It is not God's word or a magic device that allows us to foresee the future. Sunday, October 26, 2014. So right there, it kind of seems like they're covering their butts. But when you look at things like this, you cannot throw this out. You can't throw this out. You can't throw the baby out with the bathwater, because here is Obama's Ebola czar, an advocate of human depopulation. Ron Klain, before he became President Obama's latest czar, Klain is the Ebola czar, was chief of staff to a pair of Democrat vice presidents, Al Gore and the current VP, Joe Biden. His appointment by Obama has been praised high and low by liberal politicians. U.S. Senator Charles Schumer, Democrat of New York, has called his appointment an excellent choice. To counter that criticism, the Obama administration said they turned to someone with loads of managerial experience to make sure that the efforts to contain the deadly virus in the U.S. would be coordinated and efficient, and that sounds good. Except for new evidence that has surfaced which appears to indicate that Klain has very unorthodox views, though not for environmental activists, academics, and political figures, on global population. In a recent interview, Klain was asked what he thought might be the top issue facing the world. It turns out that the new Ebola czar, whose responsibility is to quash the spread of Ebola and save lives, is seemingly an advocate of population and resource control. SHTFplan.com reports, here are Klain's own words. Quote, I think the top issue facing the world today is how to deal with the continuing growing population in the world and all the resource demands it places on the world. So this overpopulation is putting a lot of demands on the resources, and it needs to be snuffed out. And burgeoning populations in Africa and Asia that lack the resource to have a healthy, happy life. I think we got to find a way to make the world work for everyone. And here is that interview right here. You can see Ron Klain. I'll turn this up as loud as I can.
What do you think is the top leadership issue challenging our world today?
Well, I think the top leadership issue challenging our world today is how to deal with a continuing growing population in the world and all the resource demands it places on the world, and burgeoning populations in Africa and Asia that lack the resources to have a healthy, happy life. And I think we've got to find a way to make the world work for everyone. Climate change is an issue that impacts that greatly by making it harder for people to live where they live, by causing disruption and a lack of resources. But that's just one of the issues. There are other issues too, and I think that the days when Americans could just be focused on America and not really be engaged in the world are past. Our economy is too dependent on events overseas. Our political system is dependent on events overseas. And I think that we've got to be engaged in the world in dealing with these tremendous issues of resources, of dislocation, and of human prosperity and survival in other parts of the world.
And I would say, going back to sort of how...
Okay, so there you have that, and obviously, you heard what he said at the very beginning. Again, if you haven't heard it, you might want to backtrack it and replay it or whatever. But he basically says overpopulation is the top concern. Okay, so with that said, when you look at Their little this Deagel site's little cover your butt um, disclaimer here. It, I really don't know what to make of it. This site has a lot of close ties in with very, very huge government agencies and other think tanks. Okay, um, so again, I cannot label this site a hoax site. I really can't. There's no evidence stating that this is a satire piece or any of that. Um, and I mean, it clearly shows that the people of this site put this forecast up here, and they did it for a certain reason. And I really don't know. But I want to kind of go a little bit into Ron Klain and see what kind of background he has. So basically, Klain was born August 8th, 1961, to Jewish parents. He graduated from North Central High School. Now, obviously, people, the whole Jewish conspiracy will kind of say, oh, but let's not stop there. He graduated from North Central High School in 1979 and was on the school's brain game team, which finished as season runner-up. He graduated summa cum laude from Georgetown University, very interesting, in 1983. And in 1987, he graduated magna cum laude from Harvard Law School. So, what kind of significance does Georgetown University and Harvard Law School have? Well, let's kind of look at this here. You're going to see something very interesting. Georgetown joins Harvard and admits EDX to enhance learning on campus globally. Now, check this out. Let's see, where it is. Right here. Okay. Along with offering online courses, Georgetown will use EDX to research how students learn and how technology can enrich learning on campus. And the universities will use tools in the EDX platform to innovate and create new approaches to teaching on campus at its Washington, D.C. and Doha, Qatar locations. Quote, in joining EDX, we become part of a consortium of institutions on the cutting edge of higher education, Deagel said. As a Catholic and Jesuit university, I'm going to say that again. As a Catholic and Jesuit university, we have been committed to working at the frontiers of education and meeting global needs since our founding in 1789, end quote. So, Harvard Law and Georgetown University clearly are Jesuit-type schools, and therefore, Ron Klain also has some kind of Jesuitical type ties to him. Again, all roads lead back to Rome, but when you look at this, look at this whole depopulation thing, and with all the craziness that is going on right now, especially with the aspect that Ebola has been so quiet, you have the huge price drop in oil, which basically is, I believe, a propaganda or a Psy-war type deal going on with Russia. Also, to basically collapse the economy, you have that going on, plus the whole racial baiting going on with Ferguson and these types of things. And you have Ebola, which has just gone quietly into the night. And then you add this into the picture, and I don't know what to say. You guys have fingers, you have a keyboard, you can make comments. But it is what it is. This isn't a means to scare anybody. Let's not be fearful of this. For the fear of man bringeth a snare. But let's keep our eyes on the Lord, because He is our refuge and He is our fortress, and He will see us through all things. So until next time, I hope this has been informative. Truth be told, truth be known, stay safe. God bless. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.